Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the JMOR Tech Talk Show. Thursday nights, 9 p.m., right here on the Starcom Radio Network. Welcome, everyone, because this is the place to ask those questions about PCs, technology, problems with your computer, iPhones, challenges pairing them to your car, wondering why that thermostat just doesn't work quite right, or maybe you're having an issue using any other piece of software on your computer. This is the place to ask the questions. All questions will be answered. So call us during our show right now at 973-826-0981. Tonight's topic on the JMOR Tech Talk Show in our second season is going to be the talk about Windows 10. You know, we talked to Ed a little bit earlier today about Windows 10, and it's pretty amazing, okay? But I have to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. You know, the question's probably going through your mind is, should I upgrade to Windows 10 or should I not upgrade to Windows 10? I think that's probably the biggest question that a lot of you have right now, and I hope to answer that for you. You know, you're probably saying to yourself, well, why should I upgrade to Windows 10? I know that's coming. And then there's some of you saying why I shouldn't upgrade to Windows 10. So let me start off and explain probably why you should not, and then I'll tell you why you should. There are more reasons to why you should, but I'm going to tell you the reasons that you should not. The first reason is that ads are shown in the start bar. Okay? They're shown in the start bar. Now, Windows actually 10 gathers more data than any previous operating system. And they do that for a plethora of reasons. One being that they want to monitor more of what's going on in the system. They want to know what's happening, okay? They want to know that type of stuff. And it's very important because if they know their stuff, then they can market to you a lot better. I mean a lot better. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is that they can, do that a lot better. But the thing is, when we talk about Windows 10, and I have to be honest about this, you can actually turn off many of those features, and it's really easy to do. And a lot of people don't know you can do this. All you have to do is go down to your little 4 white flags at the bottom left corner of Windows 10, and you can just literally start typing in settings. Once you click on settings, it will open up for you. Take a second or two to open up for you, and it's really easy. All you have to do once you go in there is go to, you guessed it, privacy. And there's a whole bunch of areas. Now, I'm not going to go through each one because we don't have time for every area. But for example, on the general, I tell people that if you're unsure about something, turn it off. Now, you're probably saying, well, will my apps work? And 99% of your apps will work. If there's something that you do and an app doesn't work, you can always go back in and turn it on. We have things like the general area. Then we have the location area. Now, the location area means that when you turn this on and these features, it will actually broadcast out to other apps and let them know your exact geolocation. Camera, do you want to let apps use your camera? Yes or no? And then you have the ability to toggle them on or off for the respected applications if you have them on. So you have that setting. You have microphone, let apps use microphones. You have notifications, let apps access my notifications. Do you want to be able to use Cortana? You could say get to know me or not right now, or turn that off. So you have a lot of things, and this is all under privacy. You have contacts, calendars, call history, email, messaging, you have radios, and then you have other devices. So I just went through a couple of them. Feedback and diagnostics, for example. Windows should ask for my feedback always, once a day, once a week, or never, or diagnostics and usage data, full, basic, or enhanced. Okay? So that's how that works, and then you have your background apps. So why do I tell this to you? Well, you see, Windows 10 was actually designed to make the developer's life a lot easier. And so what they do is they gather information about the user's data, not the user, but in so doing, what happens is the system winds up gathering data that may be traceable back to you. Now, they don't do it intentionally, but it does happen, such as if you're certain browsers or using certain programs, certain profiles, that information may be sent as part of the diagnostic. Okay, so that's what I mean about, blocking this information. So that's one reason that you may not want to upgrade if you don't turn off or have a professional like us actually come out and turn those off for you. But I gave you a little quick rundown. The other thing I want to tell you is that your older or legacy peripherals just may not work. I'm not talking about a mouse that's like a year old, that's USB. I'm talking about something that may be over 5 or 10 years old, like a very proprietary scanner, maybe a very proprietary printer. I always tell people, before they go and get Windows 10, make sure that your devices are supported by Windows 10. For example, if you buy a printer or you have a printer, you can go right to the website and you can find out whether it has a Windows 10 driver. A lot of times, ladies and gentlemen, all you have to do is actually download a new driver. That's it. You see, Windows 7 64-bit was still 64-bit. So sometimes they'll make a driver that they'll say is Windows 7 64 and Windows 10. Other times they will have a completely different driver for Windows 10. It just depends on the particular manufacturer and the driver set that they're actually writing. Now we know about older or legacy peripherals that may not work in Windows 10, so that's the one thing. Windows 10 actually updates things automatically, and there's really no way, unless you're going to get into the registry and start tweaking things around, which I'm not going to share here tonight. There's really no way to actually disable those updates in Windows 10. It pretty much just installs them automatically. If you go to your settings screen by just hitting settings, there's also another thing I want to show you. If you go to the flag and you right-click on it, you're going to see that you have a bunch of options here. Programs and features, mobility center, events, system. And we'll talk about those in a minute. But let's go back to the flag and let's type settings as we'll click on that. And when we do that, we're going to pull up our screen. Now, if we go over here and let's say we want to type in updates. So right on the screen, I could type in updates. So Windows updates will actually bring me to the Windows updates. Now, you actually can get it another way by just going down to that flag and you typing the word update. So you just type Windows updates because there's lots of updates, okay? So Windows space updates. And then you'll see it says check for updates, system settings. And it's actually going to launch, as I told you before, Windows 10 is actually it's actually part apps and part, Windows type applications. So you're going to notice that there's kind of two sides. Even when you're doing configurations like changing users, you'll notice that some of it looks like it's an app more, and some of it you'll notice is more as a program that you've seen like in Control Panel and things like that. When you get to update status, these are your options. You have check for updates. It tells me the last time it checked was 2:38 a.m. today. I can click on update history, and when I click on update history, it tells me my last update was installed February 23rd. It tells me which ones were installed, etc. There may have not been any need for any updates to be installed. You can change the active hours. Now, if you click on that, this is kind of unique. If you click on that, you can actually set the active hours, and then you can set the end time, start and end, so this way it will not bother you during that window. The other reason, getting off target here a little bit, why do you not want to upgrade to Windows 10? Well, maybe you fell in love with the Windows 8 Media Center. You don't get that in Windows 10, unfortunately. So those are just a few reasons to not upgrade to Windows 10. Now, I know what you're probably all saying, John, I know you're all saying this, I can hear it in my ears. Is Windows 10, okay, suggested hardware requirements? And that's a good question. And it really comes down to a couple things. The first thing is, we have what Microsoft says. So Microsoft says you need to run Windows 10 on a 1 gigahertz processor or faster. All right, Microsoft, this is the bare minimum, okay? 1 gigahertz is not that fast. The RAM, it needs to be 1 gigabyte. Come on. The free hard disk space, 16 gigabytes. I'm kind of laughing at that because you can't get anything on 16 gigabytes. The graphics card needs to be a Microsoft DirectX 9 graphics device with a WDDM driver. And I know what you're probably saying to me. What is the acronym? Because everything in Windows is actually it stands for something, right? So it's a Windows Display Driver Model. It's the graphic driver architecture for video card drivers running Microsoft Windows version, beginning with Windows Vista. So the chances are you probably have a system that is going to run fine. You're not going to have any issues because this is really, really minimum. Now, even though I've told you these are the minimum requirements, what I can tell you from personal experience and being in business doing this for a very, very long time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the bottom here by my white flag. I'm going to right-click on it, okay? And I'm going to go down to up to where it says System and click on it. When I click on that, that's going to be very similar to you hitting the Shift in the print screen, as many of you have done before in Windows 7. Okay, so I like to have an i5. An i7 is really ideal. An i5 is great. 8 gigs of RAM will work fine for the average word processor, person that searches the internet. Maybe they need to use Office and it'll work fine. Even if you want to open 3 or 4 programs, you're going to be perfectly fine. Even if it's a touch point tablet, you're going to be fine. If you're, however, going to do some more robust stuff like video editing and stuff like that, could you do it on 8? Yes, but what's going to happen is it's going to start caching to the hard drive a lot. So I recommend that you have at least, now the minimum requirement for home I'd recommend is 16 gigabytes. But if we do the math, it actually makes more sense, okay, to put in, it actually makes more sense, to be honest with you, to put 32 gigs of RAM. A lot of the slots on the motherboards are going to support 32, and if you waste 2 8s, now you got to throw them out. Put 2 more, you're wasting time and money. So I'd recommend 16. But now, if you're a business user, I tend to put the bar a little bit higher, ladies and gentlemen. You have databases running. There's other stuff going on in the background. So I would recommend that you have a 32 gigabytes of RAM, okay? I always recommend 64-bit. You know how I feel about that. Because anything above 4 gigs of RAM is not supported if it is a 32-bit operating system. This is why there was such a big push to try to go to Windows 10 and saying Windows 7, 64-bit. There was that big push to get off the Windows before that version, right? And to get to Windows 7, 64-bit. So the operating system that we talked about, I'm sure you remember, the operating system that came before Windows 7, okay? You probably remember this operating system. And the operating system, many of you remember, was Windows Vista. It was a disaster. I'm not even gonna bother you with that. Now, Windows XP was the one that many of us remember. Now, Windows XP, most people did not bother with a Windows XP 64. They just did XP and that was it. And it was pretty stable. It was a lot better than Windows 95 and 98. I mean, come on, right? But I got to tell you, Windows 7 did a lot better job. And I'm telling you the truth that Windows 10 is much better than Windows 7. There are some caveats to that, though. Windows 10 is a great operating system, providing that you have at least an i5 or an i7, and I'd like you to have at least 16 gigs of RAM. But if you're trying to save money in the bank, I understand that you got 8 gigs of RAM. Not a big deal there, ladies and gentlemen, okay? It's not a big deal. But just processing in Word and Power and things like that, PowerPoints or running Office, you're going to be perfectly fine. You're going to have absolutely no issue at all. Where the challenge comes in is if you start to use your laptop or your PC for other things. What are other things? Well, maybe you have databases, as I mentioned, opened, okay? I'm particularly talking things like SQL, structured query language databases, stuff like that. I'm also concerned if you're using Windows 10 and perhaps maybe you're using it for VPN, virtual private networking, it's going to use a little more resources. But Windows 10 is a very stable operating system. Are there some challenges that people have there? Absolutely. Generally, the challenges are happening for a couple reasons, and I'll share them with you. It's not that Windows 10 isn't good. It's that a lot of people are buying cheap memory. I mean cheap memory. They're not buying name brand memory. They're buying cheap memory. The other thing they're doing is, besides buying, cheap memory, they are putting a system together that has, let's say, so much junk on it that because it has so much junk on it, it actually is not efficient. And what they're doing is they're actually loading too many programs. If you go down to your start and you just type in msconfig, just start typing msconfig, okay, and you start typing that and click on that button, you're going to see that you have General Boot Services, Startup, and Tools. So click on where it says Startup. Actually, you can go right to where it says Services in Windows 10, and you can pick the one if you see something. Again, make sure you know what you're turning off. For example, if you don't need fax service, you can turn that off. And there's a lot of stuff in there. Like, for example, if you don't need the Xbox Live game save, you can turn off the whole Xbox system. There's no need to even have the Xbox systems even running, and you can apply those changes, and you're good to go. It's going to ask you if you want to restart. I'm going to exit without a restart for now, but later on it would save us. So the thing about it is that in Windows 10, you have to look at that. Now, in any system, you obviously can always look at the Task Manager by right-clicking at the bottom on the little black bar, clicking on Task Manager, and then once you do that, you're going to see where it says Process Performance, App History, Startup, Users, Detail, and Service. On processors, you're going to see, like right now, my CPU processing on the PC I'm actually doing this broadcast on is at 24 to 26%, and it keeps fluctuating. My memory usage right now is at 57%, based on the programs that I'm running to broadcast this show to you, as well as other resources I'm using. My disk resources right now during this show is 1%. That's excellent, because that means that I am not writing to disk an awful lot. My network utilization is 0. I mean, there's obviously network utilization in place, but it's so minimal that it's not even caring about it. Of course, there's something going on. Now, if we were to look at the processes based on the CPU, we can literally look at that. Now, if we go to the top there, we can actually click on it, and if we click on it, it'll actually change, and it'll bring the highest CPU process at the top. If we click it again, it'll put the lowest at the top. So you can see that my top two processes in my case are, there's a security program running, and then there is an audio device running, which obviously is using some resource. And then the next thing that's using a lot of resource is actually my program that connects to the radio station. That uses a little. So again, I'm not using a lot. And the program that connects to the radio station is only using between 0.8 to 0.9. That's peanuts. That's nothing, ladies and gentlemen. Now on the memory tab, I'm currently using 56%. The program that is using the most resources, I had Firefox open before, still had it open. It's using 348.2 megabytes. Not a big deal. Do you know what's using the second most on my computer? It's the SQL Server Windows NT. Now, why the heck am I running SQL Server? You're probably running. Well, I have ACT on here, Content Management System. And even though I'm not running ACT, the SQL Server is actually still hosting the SQL Server database, because if I was to go into ACT, the database has to be running or it'll give me an error. Now, you'll notice there's another thing down there called Cortana. You'll notice that it says 0%. So if you're not sure if you turned it off, if this doesn't say 0, then you probably didn't turn off Cortana. Okay? We go down the list. There's some more stuff here. Again, I can get into all these, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Maybe you have another program on there. For example, Microsoft Word right now is open. It'll tell you whether you have the 32-bit program installed or you have the 64-bit program installed. I do recommend installing the 32-bit, ladies and gentlemen, especially Windows 10, because a lot of the drivers out there are not going to bind correctly with the 32 version of Word. So that's really, really important. So then we have our disk, and then we have our network. So you can very easily see how well your system is utilizing resources. So if you buy good quality memory, if you buy the right speed, the right voltage, of course, and you buy the best type of memory for your computer. So there's the type, the brand, there is how many chips are on the actual that we're putting into the slot on the micro SIM that we're putting into the motherboard. For example, if one has X chips on it or has 2 chips on it, there's different ratings, and we could talk about that on another show, but I wanted to let you know because if you just buy the cheapest memory you get, you're not necessarily going to get things utilized the best way. You can check with your motherboard, with your manufacturer, with your vendor, and find out what is the best memory for my board. If I know the model of your PC, I can very easily tell you what is the best money that you can spend. I'll also tell you when you're wasting your money, because if you spend too much money on memory, there's a point where you're not going to notice a difference. For example, if my computer was able to handle 128 gigs of RAM, I would be wasting my money if I put anything more in here than 32 gigs of RAM. If I was going to do very high-end video editing, okay, and I put 64, I probably would get some utilization. 128's pushing it unless I'm doing some really long clips, because you see what happens is as we have more, there's 2 types of storage on the computer. There's primary storage, which is we have secondary storage, okay, and then we have our primary. So our secondary storage is a device that we consider to be, we have volatile and then we have non-volatile, just to give you the technical terms. Has anybody heard those words before? Okay, so volatile actually refers to the memory that would be in your RAM chips, okay, random access memory. When you turn off the computer, whatever's stored on them, it's gone, okay? You might remember the old days when you had an Apple IIe or you had a computer or a word processor and you typed it, and if you didn't save it on the disk or the plug came out accidentally, I know that never happened to anybody, you lost all your data, like, oh, and you said a whole bunch of, I'm sure you didn't say a bunch of 3 or 4 letter words, but I'm sure you were thinking them, or maybe you did, I don't know. But keep in mind, this is a G show. And as you're doing that, you're like, oh, I can't believe I didn't save it. I used to use something called OneWrite Plus. I don't know if you remember OneWrite Plus. So OneWrite Plus was actually it was in accounting, but then they actually had Write Plus. Write Plus. We had a thing called, you're probably familiar with Mac Write. These are a couple other ones. And so why do I bring this to your attention? Well, they were very limited to what you could do. So you had Control S and you had similar things, but it saved it to a floppy disk. Now, that's your secondary storage. So we don't really use floppies anymore. Our secondary storage right now is our hard drive, which could be our 500, 250, our SSD drive. It could be a USB drive. It could be our regular 500 gigabyte hard drive or 1 terabyte drive. It's the storage that stays there after the computer is actually turned off. And again, if any of you have questions on this during the show, please feel free to give us a call. We'll answer your questions live. You can call us at 973-826-0981. And if you have any question about Windows 10 or Windows 7 or have a computer issue, give us a call. We would love to talk to you. So when we talk about Windows 10 and we have the right memory in there and everything's correct, we're going to get very good utilization of our computer and its resources. Okay? So the question I want to ask you right now is why you're not upgrading to Windows 10. I know we talked about why you shouldn't upgrade to Windows 10, but you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to tell you why you should be upgrading to Windows 10. That's what I'm going to tell you right now, because there are a lot of great reasons why you should upgrade to Windows 10. The startup time in Windows 10 is much faster. Did you know that if the computer actually, when you shut down and you bring it back from a hibernate, it actually restores a lot faster, even faster than Windows 7. Now, many times when you shut a computer down, it actually doesn't fully shut down. It actually has like a stored mode, so when it comes back up, it actually starts in Windows a lot faster. That also means that if you can't get to the delete key to get to your BIOS, you can't break it, so there's actually a special way that you have to hold the shift key down, okay, while you're clicking on the actual shutdown restart. And then that'll bring you into the restore mode, but just wanted to share that with you. So we have faster boot up times. We have faster execution of programs. Now, if there's apps running in Windows 10, it's really cool because they actually run in their own protected sandbox, better than Windows 7 did, okay? So this way it doesn't crash the whole systems. That was the whole thing about Windows 64, is that in 64, we don't have to worry about it crashing the system because we now have much more room that's away from the actual operating system, and now we can compartmentalize the program. If a program crashes, it doesn't crash your whole computer. That's one reason we could talk about virtualization. And we're going to talk about that on another show, but not tonight. Virtualization is when we talk about using a computer and think of multiple computers running off one computer. So think of it like you go and turn on 3 or 4 computers. Well, you'd be clicking on an icon and you'd be building your computer, and then you'd click it and it would literally show you it's booting up and just show you the screen. It's kind of neat. We'll talk about that and we'll show you how to build one of those on another show. Start menus, Cortana. Now, a lot of people like Cortana. I don't like her. Why don't I like her? I find Cortana, I don't know, I find that she almost becomes too intrusive. She becomes like the computer that wants to know too much about your business and then try to suggest things that may not be what you want to do, okay? Many people were asking me before in an email this week, where did the name Cortana came from? Well, it's a synthetic intelligence character in Microsoft's Halo video game franchise, originating in, I think it was Bungie Folklore with Jen Taylor, and the character's voice and actress returned to the voice, the personal assistant US-specific version. So that's where Cortana came from. It's a synthetic intelligence character in Microsoft's Halo video game franchise. Now, Cortana is supposed to do things that are great for you, very similar to Siri. But the thing about Cortana is she works in Windows 10, and if you have a Windows-type mobile device, then she would work on that as well. Cortana, the best way to explain her is she's your personal assistant. You can ask her to do everything for you, but I don't think she'll make breakfast for you just quite yet. Do you need to buy flowers? Do you need to book a travel trip for you and your significant other? Maybe you need to set a location reminder on your PC to show up at a certain time. Maybe you need to be somewhere at a certain time. You can use Cortana to set time-based reminders like you do on your iPhone, as we talked about in the last show. You can use it to link with people. There's a lot of things you can do that. You can speak your mind. You can, like I said, you can use certain phones that have the Microsoft mobile operating system on there. You have a lot of convenience features. So you have all the favorite places in Cortana. They're automatically saved, like maps and things like that. You can dictate emails to Cortana. You can, to any Windows 10 device, check your flight information, and lots of other stuff. So Cortana is meant to make your life easier. But again, it's sometimes frustrating because she really just annoys you. I find I don't ever use Cortana, but again, some people do like Cortana. Now, the other thing about Windows 10 that is really phenomenal is the universal apps. Universal apps in Windows 10. That is remarkable. I mean, you can do so much stuff with universal Windows apps. I'll give you some examples. eBay is a universal app. Facebook Messenger is a universal app. You have to pay for Netflix per month, but that's a universal app. Okay? So you're probably saying to me, John, I still don't get it. What's an app? Okay, so you're familiar with your phone. Your smartphone has apps. It's a type of application that has limited functionality, but is designed to be very streamlined to just provide certain functionality and take a very low space and a low amount of resources. And apps can be programmed fairly easily because they're designed off of a platform where you can build apps. Okay, so that's pretty much where that whole philosophy comes from. In Windows 10, we have something called the Windows 10, they call it the Action Center. We didn't really have this in Windows XP. Yes, we got alerts at the bottom, but it was a little bit different than the Windows 10 Action Center, to be honest with you. Now, the Action Center is really great because it lets you know about things going on with your PC. You can display things like you can control things about whether to go to tablet mode, whether to connect to your network, not connect, do a note, settings, do a VPN, battery saver if you're on a tablet, one button click to airplane mode. Okay, so those are just a couple of them. So the nice thing is the icon lights up white when you have a new notification waiting. And you can use the keyboard shortcut, or you can use the Windows key A to open the panel. It's really easy to do. And once you've done that, that was actually done in the the final build of 10.166 of Windows 10, which was actually the techno preview. So it's been out for quite a while. And you're probably saying, okay, John, what else can I do with it? Sure, I'll tell you. A lot of things you can do with it. So in the Action Center, you'll see things like if there was an update, it tells you what happens. Like if there was a problem installing something, it'll show you in the Action Center things that you need to respond to. It's not going to tell you when an update's installing, but it will tell you when there's a problem that basically needs your action. So you have tablet mode. You can click on that. And I will tell you that if you accidentally turn on tablet mode and your screen looks really big with lots of stuff, or you wonder why your whole desktop of your, let's say your Metro, they used to call it your Metro desktop, but that's the one that has all the tiles on it. If you're wondering why it's so big, I'll tell you why. You turned on tablet mode by accident. Just hit the white flag button with the A, and you can very easily take care of that. You have a brightness button. If you click on the brightness button, you can change it. It'll show you the different brightnesses. So, for example, right now my brightness is at 90%. If I click it, I could actually change that 25, 50, 75, or I can go 100. Okay? So again, very, very useful. I can actually go right into something and I can change it very easily. So it's meant to make your life easy. That's really where it comes from. Battery saver on mine is grayed out because I am hooked up to the electricity currently. There's project, which actually will allow you to use a projector. And then we have a button down here that says connect. The connect button is searching for wireless display devices to connect. And if it finds one, it lets you connect it very easy and very simply. So that's the Action Center. I think it's really cool because you're never going to really miss anything in Windows 10. I think that's the thing that's probably the thing that I like the most about Windows 10 is that it's just very, very easy to use. And it is kind of intuitive. Despite some of the fear that you may have, Windows 10 is a very easy-to-use system, but it just takes a little bit of playing around with. Not a lot, okay? The average person that has used Windows 7 that will adapt to Windows 10, I will say probably within about 2 days to a week, depending on how quickly they learn things. So really not a long time, to be honest with you. There are certain things that you can do, but I'm talking about the basic functionality of just getting familiar with doing the same kinds of things that you were doing in Windows 7. Now, if you were coming from Windows XP, the learning curve, we all know going from XP to Windows 7 was a little bit, right? So you can imagine going from a Windows, let's say a Windows XP to a Windows 10, that would be like a double learning curve, right? Now, in Windows 10, another benefit, there's lots of benefits, aren't there? The other benefit is that you can use Windows 10, okay, to do something called touch support. So what's nice is that they made it so easy because it has it built right into the operating system. That's the other thing I love about Windows 10. If you ever have to reinstall Windows 10, all of the drivers just sort of magically install from the image as long as they're supported. And you don't have to go loading multiple drivers. Like if you remember the days in Windows XP, everything was a driver. The video card was a driver. The network card was a driver. The touch was a driver. If you had a modem, it was a driver. I mean, everything was a driver. The USB was a driver, for crying out loud. The smart functions on your keyboard were drivers, just if you want to hit the hotkeys, right? So they really tried, and I got to give them a heads off. I don't usually compliment them that often, but I think they did a great job in embedding a lot of the very needed drivers that most people would use in their laptop or their PC for business or for home. So like I said, as long as your device is within 5 years, or if it's a device slightly older than that, even maybe more than that, you're probably going to be fine as long as there's a Windows 10 supported driver, because the system can actually go out there and search for the Windows 10 driver, which is really pretty cool. So you can get around Windows faster with a touchscreen, okay? You can look at, there's something here I want to share with you. It's called the Windows keyboard shortcuts. So you can add a desktop very easily by hitting the Windows key, Control D. So Windows key and Control D is pretty easy. If you hit that, it actually basically takes you back to your desktop. So again, very, very easy and very, very, very simple how that works. And so that adds basically a desktop, a Windows look, just a Windows key and Control D. You can move an app to the monitor on the right by hitting the Windows key and Shift right arrow. You can move an app to a monitor to the left by doing a Windows key Shift left arrow. Pretty easy. To show all open apps and view additional desktops you created, the Windows key tab. The Windows key tab will show you all the additional, so you can create additional desktops. Why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you're going back and forth between programs, okay? And it's important that maybe you just go back to that desktop and you had something set up right. You can do that. It's really easy, and I mean it is really, really simple. So again, that's something that, again, what they tried to do, ladies and gentlemen, in Windows 10 is they tried to make it, I'm going to say the word is customizable. That's what they tried to do. They tried to give you a user experience that has a lot of flexibility, all right? You can show, let's say you want to switch between desktops you created. You can hit the Windows key and Control right and switch between desktops you created. You can switch between desktops you create on the left by going Windows Control left. Close the desktop you're using and just hit the Windows key, Control F4. So then, this is stuff that would be used mostly. These are keyboard shortcuts. You can do touchscreen gestures. You can, so just as I explained to you how you would use your finger to move them, you can also do it with the key. So that's how that works. Just explain to you. Mostly it's used with the touch, but it can be used, obviously, without the touch. So that's what we call touch support. So you can click, you can touch, you can drag, and I got to tell you, I think they did a pretty good job with the way that works. So why else do you want Windows 10? I'm giving you a lot of reasons to go to Windows 10, but before I give you these next reasons, they're about security, I want to share a very important tidbit with you. Did you know that you can actually still get and install Windows 10 even though the free update is over? There is a way that we as technicians can install Windows 10 for you free of charge. Now, there is one catch. The catch is your computer has to be within the last 3 years. So when you purchased it, it had to be eligible to get Windows 10, but you just didn't choose to get it. The second thing is, if you're going to do an in-place upgrade, okay, you're fine with the hard drive you have. If you have to do an overwrite, then you need to go to a Windows, a terabyte or more, because that's the minimum requirements for doing a fresh install of Windows 10. But remember, all of the drivers automatically install. Now, when you do a Windows 10 upgrade, it does take a little bit of time because, again, if you're preserving the existing environment. So I guess my question to you is, do you really need to save the environment? Because it's going to take you a little over 2 hours to install a upgrade, and it's going to probably take you about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half, to install a fresh copy. But keep in mind, you're going to have to reinstall those programs. Make sure if you have Outlook or other programs that you do what, ladies and gentlemen? You back up your data. I can't stress how important it is that you back up your data. Because if you do not back up your data, you are going to be very, 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 very sorry. I know the tale everyone always says is it's always easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. Well, in this particular situation, that is completely wrong because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it's not really permission. It's actually going to be a problem because, you're going to be sorry, but there's going to be no way to forgive yourself for what you did because you might have lost your data. And again, I don't think someone else is going to forgive you too easily, especially if that was one of those databases they spent days and years on. And they didn't even know what a backup is. So that's not one of those times when you can say, I'll just ask for forgiveness later. Don't do that. I know that's the caveat in everyday world. We figure that, can I borrow this? Can I do that? He won't mind, she won't mind, and I'll just do it, and whatever happens, happens, and I'll just say, oh, honey, I'm sorry, or oh, Bobby, I'm sorry, or Mary, I'm sorry. And that can seem sincere, and it can kind of work. But that's not going to work here because it's not really a person that's the problem. The problem is your data, and the person that's going to be sorry is basically you. If you damage someone else's data, that's a different story. But most of the time, it's when you do something and you can't get your data back, so you're going to be really sorry. All right, just a few more things about Windows 10. I hope you've been finding this interesting tonight. We haven't had any calls tonight, but if you do want to call us, we do have some time. You can call us at 973-826-0981. And we'll be happy to take your calls live here on the air. So let's talk about security, ladies and gentlemen. We talk about security because security is one of the big cornerstones for why so many people and consultants push Windows 10. Do I really think the security is great, to be honest with you? It's okay. They have a couple things out there. One of them is called the Windows 10, you may or may not have heard it, Windows 10 Secure Boot. Okay? So the Windows 10 Secure Boot is pretty straightforward, but what it really means is that all of the drivers, okay, make sure that it is actually, that the drivers are signed. So there are real security advantages to having Secure Boot enabled, even if you have Linux or whatever it is. But in Windows 10, a traditional BIOS will boot any software when you boot your PC. It checks the hardware, makes sure the boot order is correct, it configured correctly, and then it attempts to boot from them. Typically, PCs are going to find and boot the Windows loader, and it goes on, and then it boots the system, and everything's good. However, if there's malware on there or a rootkit on there, to replace your bootloader, that's going to be a serious problem. If Secure Boot is enabled, then it will be designed to stop this. Because if something got written to the boot record, to the disk, that was not a secure certified file by the driver, it's not going to allow it to modify, and it's going to prevent the malware from hijacking your boot process, and it's going to conceal itself from your operating system. So I think that's pretty powerful. So the feature, in theory, is designed to protect against malware. Okay, so Microsoft is giving us a way to help us with Linux distributions boot anyway. That's why modern Linux distributions like Ubuntu, Fedora, things like that will just work. But the thing about it is that if you don't have everything secure, your drivers aren't secure, the hardwares are not secure, and the firmware is not even a assigned firmware, then it's not going to allow you to boot. So I know it sounds great, and it is. The reason why you would not want to use Secure Boot if it was an older computer, it didn't have the secure hardware on there, and now you try to enable it, because everything has to be secure, including the firmware, not just the software. And remember, the firmware is just the software version that's actually burned into a chip. That's the only difference between firmware, ladies and gentlemen, and hardware. Firmware and software. So hardware has software that can be used to control it, but then it also has firmware, which is software loaded onto the hardware, typically in a chip. That's where that comes from. In Windows 10, we have some really cool types of logon authentication. You can have, you can replace passwords with two-factor authentication. Some examples are biometric. Now, normally when we think of biometric, we're thinking of our fingerprint, aren't we? Well, that's not what I'm talking about. We're actually talking about something else. Facial recognition, okay, is another thing that's going to be really cool, because what the scanners can do, certain scanners they have in the laptops will actually scan your facial recognition characteristics, and based on that, they'll allow you to log in to the system. I think that is actually amazing. Now, when we talk about Windows 10, there's something else I want to share with you. You can actually have the ability to have a local account on the Windows 10 machine, which is great, but let's say you're managing a family and they always forget their passwords. You could use the Microsoft managed Central license, which is an account on the Microsoft server. Again, it's free, but keep in mind, if you do this, ladies and gentlemen, the system is going to track information about you. So what I recommend not using it. The disadvantage is if you don't know your password, you're going to have to call a professional to reset it. What I usually recommend is having another account. You keep that password somewhere special, and you can still log in and change their passwords very easily. The fingerprint and the eyes are really great. The face, that works really well. You can go to your computer, you can look at the screen. A couple seconds, it looks at your screen, it unlocks the screen. I think that is just so great. I think that is so powerful, and it's kind of amazing. So in Windows 10, they have something called the Windows Hello. It's basically, how do I put this to you? It's a personal way for you to have your customization of signing into Windows 10. So you can do it through touch, using gestures like moving things around a screen like a puzzle. You can do it through using the biometric options, such as your finger, or you can use your face for the biometric login. So, those are just some kind of ideas. I hope that helps you and gives you an idea. I don't want you to be scared about Windows 10, but I just want you to know that it is a slightly different operating system. And when you choose to use the cloud account, which is what they want you to do, what's going to happen is all your data is now going to be accumulated onto their cloud. And then when you use your other device, oh, great, it's available on the other device. Now, I know that sounds really cool, ladies and gentlemen, to have your information on all the devices. But remember, there's a cost to that. And the cost is tracking you. Okay? Again, I know a lot of you are up in the air. And if you have any questions about, upgrading to Windows 10, or you're not sure if it's worth it, we'll be more than happy to help you. We've been doing this for a while, and I can tell you that being in business over 25 years, that if you were to have a computer and it didn't make sense to upgrade to Windows 10, we would tell you. Because a lot of times, companies want you to spend money upgrading when it's actually cheaper to get a whole new system. Okay, so that's the important thing. What we try to build, ladies and gentlemen, is relationships. That's really what it's all about. And I hope that tonight has been a very useful and informational show for you. We try to find great topics to educate you about what's going on. There's still plenty of time. If you need to get your computer upgrade to Windows 10, let us know. You can visit our website right now. We're 24 hours a day at JMOR.com. And you can chat with us right there 24 hours a day as well. If you have ideas for another upcoming show, just drop us a line right there on our website. Contact us, and we'd be happy to put a show together to answer your questions. So I hope that I've given you an understanding of why you should not. There are a couple reasons why you should not. And then the reasons of why you should upgrade to Windows 10. That's pretty much what I hope you got out of tonight's show. And that people out there are going to tell you that Windows 10 is a problem. And yes, I would have agreed with them a while ago. I only kind of gave my blessing on Windows 10 in September. And there were lots of security issues. I have to really, really applaud Microsoft, which again I don't do all the time, because they really hunkered down and they made a pretty good quality operating system. I mean, I'm comfortable to use it in our business. I'm comfortable to have companies using it. And I gave that blessing in September because I know that the system is stable. Are there some challenges with legacy hardware? If I didn't tell you that, I'd be lying to you. So there are some little inconveniences, yes. I don't feel it's going to affect the masses. So I'm thinking it might affect less than 10 to 20% of the people out there, which I think is pretty good, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's really, really good. And I hope that, as you hear things about Windows 10, and if you decide that you didn't want Windows 10, we could always roll it back within like 30 days. I tell people 28 because after 30 days, it deletes the files and then you can't go back. Windows 10 is going to be here to stay. Windows 7 64-bit is scheduled to be end of life in 2020. So if you don't upgrade to Windows 10, ladies and gentlemen, what's going to happen to you? Well, things like your antivirus programs may start to be inoperable or may not be able to be as effective as they once were because they're not able to talk to the same infrastructures. So that's going to happen. We're going to notice that's going to happen. I mean, you all saw the difference between going to XP, right, and then going all the way up the line to Windows 7. There were challenges. I mean, for many of you that were with 2003, right, you couldn't run software that was on 2003 you went to their server 2012, that software wouldn't work. So again, another thing that I like about Windows 10 is they have a built-in secure encrypt option, which works great on the system. It also works great with their product OneDrive. There's really a lot of benefits to Windows 10. What I would tell you is that you don't want to just use it out of the box the way it comes, because if you do, you're just going to be sorry. That's probably the best thing that I can tell you. You may not have it tweaked the right way, and we actually can help you. We can help you make Windows 10 a very positive and very smooth transition in your experience. Somebody asked me a good question today, and that was, John, I don't want your tech to come out or you to come out all the time. And I hear you. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to, and I'm not an engineer with cars, but I am with technology and electric and things like that. But it's very similar. Your car breaks down, right? There are things on your car that break down. There are things on your computer that break down. Things are going to need maintenance, right? So why not set a maintenance schedule, accept the maintenance schedule, do what the technician or the maintenance person tells you so that you can actually, let's say, keep your product as long as you can. The average turnover, ladies and gentlemen, on a product for a PC is 5 years. Now, some servers go more than that. Why do we say that? Because after 5 years, the technology has evolved. And if you're doing anything more than, let's say, adding memory or a hard drive, it really doesn't pay to do too much. I mean, a video card could go bad, I understand, but a lot of things are embedded, depending if it's a custom PC or if it was one of these, let's say, bulk-made PCs by like Lenovo or Acer or something like that. So again, Windows 10 is a great operating system. It does use more resources. It will utilize your system in a different way, and it will create a very different kind of media experience for those of you that are playing files and things of that nature. I also like the ability that you can add lots of stuff to your little bar on the side of the start, which is really cool. So these are just some of the things that I like. I've tried to give you a little bit of an example of, what's really happening in Windows 10. And I think most of you that see Windows 10, when they see it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I really want to do Windows 10. But it's not really a matter of doing Windows 10. It's just getting past that first screen. And once you get past that first screen and you create all your users locally, it's not a lot different than Windows 7. It's just where you find things. You're going to see programs are going to open faster. You're going to see more reliability in Windows 10. And if you have it configured correctly, the memory is going to be utilized a lot better. So that means faster performance times, faster boot up times. There's just a lot of benefits. Another benefit that I can tell you right now, I told you about the one-click options. I like the way that you can go into the system, into the folder area, and you can right-click on a folder, and you can choose to go right to Properties, okay? And when you go to Properties and you go to where it says you have Previous Version, you have Customize, you have Sharing, and you have General. I mean, they made that very, very similar to Windows 7, right? If you have a Windows 7 system and you have a Windows 10 system, the question everyone always asks me, can you have a mixed or a hybrid environment? I'm going to answer this in two ways. The answer is yes and no. If you're just sharing files, okay, from one PC to another or connecting to a server, no problem. Providing it's file sharing. If you have a program that's like client server and there's a database on the server, you have to make sure their program is able to run or be compatible to run in Windows 10. I talked to an eye doctor the other day, and we were converting them from Windows 7 to Windows 10, but I told them, make sure everything works well and works smooth. Okay? That's the only thing there. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great evening. My name is John Morley. You've been listening here to the JMOR Tech Talk Show. We are on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Starcom Radio Network.